Good morning, I'm Taylor Wilson, and today is Friday, April 25th, 2025. This is the Excerpt. Today, more shakeups at the Pentagon, plus we take a closer look at some of Trump's education moves this week, and let's talk about bone collector caterpillars. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's chief of staff is out. Joe Casper is the fourth top official to be fired or reassigned in the last week amid political turmoil at the Pentagon. He will continue to work on special projects at the Pentagon, according to a defense official who was not authorized to speak publicly. The unrest at the height of the military's leadership is highly unusual. Hegseth has been the focus of a Pentagon Inspector General's review of his handling of sensitive military information on the commercial app Signal. Last month, Casper was among senior Pentagon officials who vowed to crack down on leaks. He issued a memo warning that those suspected of disclosing sensitive information could be subject to lie detector tests. President Donald Trump next week will reach 100 days in office. Not since Franklin Roosevelt has a new president driven so many shifts so fast. It takes most presidents months or even years to make a difference in the daily lives of Americans, not to mention those who live around the world. But this time, Trump's unprecedented use of executive powers has already slashed the federal workforce, banned diversity programs, dismantled U.S. aid, divided opposition Democrats over how to respond, and prompted longstanding U.S. allies to calculate how to navigate a new global reality. For more on 100 things that have changed so far, we have a link in today's show notes. It's been a busy week when it comes to the Trump administration and moves around education. I spoke with education reporter Zach Shermley for the latest. Thanks for hopping on, Zach.
Hey, Taylor. Thanks for having me.
So, Zach, just a busy week for education news. Let's start with this news from yesterday. What did a judge decide here about Trump's ability to withhold school funds over DEI?
A federal judge in New Hampshire restricted the ability of President Donald Trump's administration to cut off funding to public schools that engage in these, as you say, diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts and programs. The judge issued a preliminary injunction which prevents the Education Department from enforcing its anti-DEI policies against members of a couple of groups, but one of those groups is the National Education Association, which helped bring that lawsuit. This comes after, in mid-February, the Trump administration told tens of thousands of K-12 schools and colleges that they had just 2 weeks to comply with a pretty sweeping order to root out DEI on their campuses. And earlier this month, the department gave state education commissioners across the country just 10 days to certify that they're following civil rights laws. Keep in mind, Title I funding, which goes to support public schools that have a disproportionate amount of students on free and reduced lunch, is a huge source of funding for schools all across the country. So if that were to go away, it would be a huge deal. And a lot of these court orders now are just sort of putting a pause on the administration's efforts while the legal arguments play out.
It's a great explainer. So as I say, lots of news coming this week. What else led up to this point here, Zach?
Trump signed 7 orders that could impact American schools from the Oval Office this week. One affected the rules governing college accreditors. So this is a little wonky, and I'll not get too much into the weeds about it, but college accreditors are independent organizations that colleges need to go through if they want to distribute things like Pell Grants and student loans. But the Education Department and the Trump administration now wants to see some pretty sweeping changes. They're wanting accreditors to stop recognizing colleges that disaggregate student data by race and gender. So it's very much a piece of this broader war on DEI coming from the Trump administration. And that order would also make it easier for colleges to change accreditors and for new accreditors to form. Some of the other executive orders would reinforce some laws around universities and what they have to disclose about foreign gifts and contracts with other countries and organizations. There was another executive order Trump signed that would overhaul disciplinary measures in schools as well.
And meanwhile, Trump this week did reaffirm his commitment to supporting the nation's historically black colleges and universities, also known as HBCUs. What can you tell us here, Zach, and how is this landing with folks?
Yeah, so it's really interesting that the administration, despite its targeting of diversity programs in higher education more broadly, has really been supportive of historically Black colleges and universities, at least rhetorically, and with this executive order as well. Trump, during his first term, brought in an initiative to the White House to oversee historically Black colleges and universities. Then, when Biden took over, he continued on that initiative and housed it in the education department. And Trump is really just continuing this longstanding federal support for HBCUs with issuing this order. So it really reinforces the Trump administration's prioritization of HBCUs over other types of colleges.
All right, well, Zach, we also heard more about AI courses and certifications for high schoolers, Trump creating an order around these as well. What will this now functionally mean?
So the directive instructs a couple cabinet members, notably the education secretary and the secretary of the labor department, to work with states to promote artificial intelligence in K-12 schools. And it really underscores an area of bipartisan concern here in Washington, which is, how to best incorporate AI into teaching. Both Democrats and Republicans have expressed a lot of fears and concerns over American students falling behind other nations as technology becomes more advanced and integrated into the workforce, with making sure that they stay up to date on the latest AI advancements. But they've disagreed a lot over the role that federal regulations should play.
All right, Zach Shermley covers education for USA Today. Folks can stick with his coverage as always for more on some of these stories. Zach, I appreciate your insight as always.
Thank you, Taylor.
A federal judge yesterday blocked parts of President Trump's executive order seeking to impose new rules on U.S. elections. Democrats and other groups said the move risks denying eligible citizens the right to vote. A judge ruled the Trump administration cannot enforce parts of the order requiring federal election officials to assess whether people who are registering to vote are citizen. The judge, though, declined to block parts of the order that sought to force states not to count mail-in ballots received after Election Day. Trump and some Republicans have made baseless claims about widespread voting by non-citizens, which is illegal and rarely happens. Have you heard of bone collector caterpillars? I spoke with USA Today national correspondent Elizabeth Weiss about the bizarre carnivorous insects. Hey there, Beth.
Hey, here on the icky bug beat.
I love this story. Let's just start with a couple of the basics, Beth, here at the top. What are these caterpillars, and I guess where and how were they found?
So they only exist in Hawaii, and they actually only exist in this one tiny space in a mountain valley in western Oahu. So it's about 5 miles square. And a bunch of entomologists at the University of Hawaii started running across them about 20 years ago and didn't actually realize what they were seeing at first. They just thought that they were caterpillars that had gotten kind of clogged up in some spider's web. And then the next year they'd see a few, and then the next year. And then finally they were like, wait a minute, what's going on here? And then they started to study them. And they're just publishing kind of their existence now. It's so new, they actually don't have a Latin name yet. So they are just calling them bone collector caterpillars.
Let's talk about some of their kind of unique behavior and tell us about this carnivorous aspect, I guess. That really stood out to me, Beth.
We get press releases from upcoming scientific journals. And when you see carnivorous bone collecting caterpillar discovered, you're like, okay, I got to write about that. So carnivorous caterpillars are really rare. Most caterpillars, munch on leaves and things like that. But a tiny proportion of them eat other insects. So these guys figured out over time that they could live in a spider's nest with a spider, a live spider. And it had two things going for it. It was really safe because if anything else came along that might try and eat them, the spider would get it first. And also, there's bits of food laying around because the spiders trap insects, they wrap them up in silk, and maybe they come back and eat them later. And these caterpillars would go and eat either bug leftovers, the researcher called it like dried bug jerky that's stuck in the net, or they'll just go to the still living insect that's been captured in the web and eat part of it when the spider isn't around.
I love that bug jerky. That's fantastic. I guess, and you touched on this, Beth, a little bit, but isn't it dangerous for a caterpillar to hang out in a spider's web like this?
Oh, yeah, because the spider will eat you if it realizes you are there. They belong to a very odd group of caterpillars called fancy case caterpillars, which are caterpillars that weave a kind of a silk shroud around themselves, and they weave it such that they camouflage themselves as something else. These guys figured out that, okay, I want to live in a spider web. There's a spider, it will eat me if it realizes it's there. How can I camouflage myself? And so when they spin this web, then, and this is where it gets kind of gross, like they basically wander around the web, finding bits and pieces of the dead insects that the spider has eaten, and they pick them up and they actually turn them around in their pincers and kind of contemplate them a while, and sometimes even chew them to make them the right size, and then they stick them to the case so that over time they look like they're just a bunch of bug parts kind of stuck together. But inside that is this little caterpillar. But you can't really go and interview the spider and say, well, what do you think of this? But what the researchers think is happening is that if these caterpillars mistakenly trigger the web, they touch something and the spider thinks, oh, there's something there, and it runs over. They will smell like, and they will taste, if the spider tries to take a bite out of them, they'll just taste like trash that's left in the web, and the spider will leave them alone. And they have never in 20 years found one of these caterpillars that was trapped in a web. So they think it works pretty well.
Well, these appear to only exist in a tiny stretch of one Hawaiian island, right? At least as far as we know. Are there extinction worries, Beth, and what's being done around conservation efforts?
The researchers are actually quite concerned about these because there are not many of them at all. And they're in this one tiny little place. It's interesting because I said, well, they're in a conserved forest. Why are you still worried? And it turns out Hawaii is the extinction capital of America. And although we've preserved a lot of Hawaii, I mean, if you've ever been there, they've got parks everywhere. The problem is invasive species. But the good thing about these caterpillars is they evolved clearly to live with Hawaiian spiders, and the Hawaiian spiders are getting killed off by invasive spiders, but they also seem to have figured out that they can live in the nests of these non-native spiders that have taken up residence in Hawaii as well. But still, we definitely, like I said, aren't you worried? Like if you tell people where they are, it's like people collect a lot of strange things. They don't really collect caterpillars.
All right, this was another just awesome story from you, Beth. Elizabeth Weiss is a national correspondent with USA Today. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to The Excerpt. We're produced by Shannon Ray Green and Kelly Monahan, and our executive producer is Laura Beatty. You can get the podcast wherever you get your pods, and if you're on a smart speaker, just ask for The Excerpt. I'm Taylor Wilson. I'll be back tomorrow with more of The Excerpt from USA Today.